He paid 5 cents for an orphanage in broad daylight at a county foreclosure auction where investors with thousands of dollars in their pockets stood motionless, watching him place what should have been the bargain of the century. But not a single person challenged his bid, and when the gavel finally fell, Marcus Webb realized that every face in the crowd was looking at him with something that made his blood run cold. Not envy, but pity, as if he'd just purchased his own nightmare instead of a golden opportunity. The spring morning had started like any other foreclosure sale in Cedar Heights, Michigan. Marcus Webb had driven 3 hours from Detroit specifically for this auction, having spotted the listing online 2 weeks earlier. St. Catherine's Home for Children, a 3-story brick building on 4 acres of land in the heart of a revitalizing neighborhood. The property had been abandoned for 12 years after the archdiocese that owned it had gone bankrupt. Based on recent comparable sales in the area, Marcus estimated the land alone was worth at least $200,000. The building would need extensive renovation, sure, but the bones were solid, built in 1923 with limestone foundations and proper masonry that modern construction couldn't match. When Marcus arrived at the courthouse steps where the auction was being held, he was surprised to find only about 30 people gathered. For a property this valuable, he'd expected fierce competition. Instead, the crowd seemed subdued, almost funereal. The auctioneer, a stocky man named Gerald Pritchard, who'd been conducting these sales for 20 years, moved through the morning's properties with practiced efficiency. But when he reached St. Catherine's Says, his demeanor changed noticeably. "Next item," Pritchard announced, his voice lacking its usual enthusiasm. "St. Catherine's Orphanage at 847 Maple Avenue, 4 acres, zoned mixed-use residential. Starting bid is 5 cents. 5 cents. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Even as a legal formality, starting bids were usually set at a few $100s minimum. He looked around, expecting someone to immediately jump in. The crowd included several local real estate investors he recognized from previous auctions, people who wouldn't hesitate to snap up a property worth hundreds of thousands. But nobody moved. "Do I hear 5 cents?" Pritchard called out, sounding almost reluctant. Marcus raised his hand. 5 cents. The auctioneer's face went pale. Several people in the crowd actually gasped. An elderly woman near the front shook her head slowly, clutching her purse as if witnessing something tragic. "We have 5 cents, Pritchard said quietly. "Do I hear 10 cents? The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Marcus watched as investors who'd been aggressively bidding on previous properties suddenly found their shoes fascinating. One man he knew, Richard Torres, a developer who'd renovated half the commercial district, caught his eye and mouthed a single word. "Don't." "Going once," Pritchard called, his gavel hovering uncertainly. An older man with a priest's collar stepped forward from the crowd. Father Michael O'Brien, according to the name tag visible on his black shirt. "Son," the priest said, his voice gentle but urgent, "you don't want that building. Trust me when I tell you. Walk away from this." But Marcus was already doing the math. Even if the building needed $500,000 in renovations, the property value made this the opportunity of a lifetime. Whatever superstitious nonsense was keeping these people from bidding, he wasn't going to let fear stop him from making a smart investment. "I'm sure it's fine, Father," Marcus replied politely. "Going twice," Pritchard announced, and Marcus could swear the man's hand was shaking. Father O'Brien stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Marcus could hear. 12 years ago something happened in that building, something that made the archdiocese seal it permanently. There are things hidden in those walls that powerful people don't want found. Please. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed off the courthouse steps. Sold to the gentleman in the gray jacket for 5 cents. The crowd began dispersing immediately, but Marcus noticed something unsettling. At least half the people weren't leaving. They were staying at a distance, watching him with that same expression of pity, waiting to see what he would do next. As Marcus approached the auctioneer to complete the paperwork, Pritchard handed him the deed with trembling hands and refused to make eye contact. "The keys are in the clerk's office," he muttered. "Property is sold as is. No inspections, no warranties, no refunds. Why did it go for 5 cents? Marcus asked. Pritchard finally met his eyes, and the fear Marcus saw there was genuine, because nobody who knows the history would touch it for any price. You just bought the one property in Cedar Heights that everyone in this town wishes would burn to the ground." The first visit Marcus drove to St. Catherine's that afternoon, trying to shake off the ominous warnings. In his 15 years as a property investor, he'd heard every superstition and urban legend imaginable. Haunted houses, cursed land, buildings where terrible things had happened. None of it had ever stopped him from seeing the actual value in a property. The Orphanage sat at the corner of Maple Avenue and 14th Street, an imposing 3-story brick building with Gothic Revival architecture. Ivy had overtaken much of the eastern wall, and several windows on the upper floors were broken, but the structure itself appeared remarkably solid. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, secured with a padlock that looked far newer than 12 years old. Someone had been maintaining this fence, replacing the lock periodically. Marcus used the keys from the county clerk and let himself in. The grounds were overgrown but not completely wild. Someone had been mowing occasionally. The grass was high, but not jungle-like. As Marcus walked toward the main entrance, he noticed something else strange: fresh tire tracks in the muddy area near the side gate, and cigarette butts that couldn't be more than a few weeks old. Someone had been coming here regularly. Recently, the main entrance had been secured with industrial chains and another new padlock. Marcus fumbled with the key ring until he found the right one. The lock opened with a solid click, and the chains fell away with a heavy rattle that seemed too loud in the afternoon quiet. The heavy oak door swung inward with a prolonged creak. Inside, Marcus found himself in a large entry hall with a sweeping staircase. Dust motes danced in the light streaming through grimy windows, and the air smelled stale but not rotten, not like a building that had been truly abandoned for over a decade. The floor was covered in a layer of dust, but Marcus could see footprints, recent ones, judging by their clarity. Multiple sets, all leading deeper into the building. His first thought was that squatters or vandals had been using the place. But the footprints were too deliberate, too purposeful. They led directly down the main hallway, turned left at a specific doorway, and disappeared into what appeared to be an administrative wing. Marcus followed the trail, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The walls were lined with old photographs, class pictures of children from different eras, staff members, and what looked like official visits from church dignitaries and city officials. The footprints led him to what had once been the director's office. The door stood ajar, revealing a large room with built-in bookshelves, a massive oak desk, and filing cabinets lining one wall. But it was the wall behind the desk that caught his attention. A section of the plaster had been removed. Recently, based on the fresh debris on the floor, someone had carefully cut away a rectangular section, about 4 feet wide and 3 feet tall, revealing the brick wall beneath. Then they'd stopped, as if they'd found something that made them abandon their excavation.
Marcus approached the opening and peered inside. Between the plaster and the brick wall was a hollow space, common in buildings of this era for insulation and air circulation. But this space wasn't empty. Tucked into the cavity was a metal document box, sealed with wax and stamped with what looked like an official seal. Next to it was a leather-bound ledger, its cover cracked with age, but still intact. Marcus carefully extracted both items and set them on a dusty desk. His hands were shaking slightly as he suddenly broke the wax seal on the metal box. Inside were dozens of envelopes, all addressed to various officials. The Archbishop of Detroit, the Governor of Michigan, the United States Attorney General, the Governor of Michigan, the United States Attorney General, the IRS Commissioner. Each envelope was marked, "You're against," to be opened only in the event of my death, and the open only in the event of my death, and signed by Sister Mary Catherine, dated October 2013. Marcus opened the leather ledger with growing apprehension. The first page,
What follows is evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving the archdiocese, state officials, and wealthy benefactors who used this orphanage as a vehicle for financial crimes spanning 2 decades. I have documented everything, every falsified adoption record, every laundered payment, every child whose identity was stolen for tax fraud. The total amount stolen exceeds $66 million. I pray that you have the courage to expose what I could not. God forgive us all. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. $66 million. He began flipping through the ledger pages, his horror growing with each entry. Detailed records of fake adoption paperwork created to generate fraudulent tax deductions for wealthy donors. Lists of children whose social security numbers had been used for years after they'd left the orphanage. Bank account numbers showing how money had been funneled through the orphanage's accounts and distributed to various individuals. Names jumped out at him: prominent businessmen, a state senator, church officials at the highest levels of the archdiocese, all of them involved in systematically defrauding the government and exploiting vulnerable children for financial gain. Sister Mary Catherine had documented everything with meticulous care: dates, amounts, account numbers, copies of forged documents. It was a complete roadmap of a massive criminal conspiracy. Marcus heard a sound from the hallway, the creak of a floorboard. He froze, listening intently. Someone else was in the building. Through the office's window, he could see 2 vehicles pulling up to the chain-link fence, vehicles that hadn't been there when he'd arrived. 4 men were getting out, moving with purpose toward the building. Marcus quickly gathered the metal box and ledger, his mind racing. The fresh excavation in the wall, the recent footprints. Someone had been searching for these documents, and now that Marcus had legally purchased the property, they knew exactly where to find them. He could hear voices now, echoing through the empty corridors, getting closer. "Check the director's office first," a man's voice called out. "If he found the documents, that's where he'll be." Marcus looked around frantically for another exit. The office had two doors, the one he'd entered through and another that appeared to lead deeper into the administrative wing. He grabbed the evidence and slipped through the second door, just as he heard footsteps approaching the main entrance. He found himself in a narrow hallway lined with storage rooms. At the end of the corridor was a service staircase, probably used by staff to move between floors without disturbing the children. Marcus descended as quietly as he could, clutching the box and ledger to his chest. Behind him, he could hear the men entering the director's office, their voices raised in frustration when they found it empty. He was just here. The dust is disturbed. Find him. He can't have gone far, and he can't leave with those documents. Marcus reached the ground floor and found himself in what had once been the kitchen, a large institutional space with ancient appliances and prep tables. There was a delivery entrance on the far side, partially hidden behind what looked like a walk-in pantry. He ran for it, hearing footsteps pounding down the service stairs behind him. The delivery door was locked from the inside with a simple deadbolt. Marcus twisted it frantically and burst out into the afternoon sunlight, just as the men reached the kitchen. His car was parked at the front of the building, no way to reach it without being seen. But the property backed up to an alley, and beyond that was a residential neighborhood with tree-lined streets and plenty of places to disappear. Marcus ran, the metal box banging against his side and the ledger tucked under his arm. Behind him he could hear shouting as the men emerged from the building. He ducked through a gap in the fence, sprinted across the alley, and plunged into the maze of residential streets beyond. He kept running until his lungs burned and his legs felt like rubber, finally collapsing behind a thick hedge in someone's backyard, gasping for breath. He could hear cars driving slowly through the neighborhood, searching for him. Marcus looked down at the evidence he'd recovered. Documents that proved a conspiracy worth $66 million. Sister Mary Catherine had been right to hide them, and if the urgency of his pursuers was any indication, she'd probably been murdered for trying to expose the truth. Now Marcus understood why nobody at the auction had been willing to bid. They all knew what was hidden in St. Catherine's walls. They knew that whoever bought that property would become the target of people willing to kill, to keep their crimes buried. He'd paid 5 cents for an orphanage and inherited a death sentence. As the sun began to set and the search cars continued their methodical patrol of the neighborhood, Marcus realized he had to make a choice. He could abandon the evidence, walk away from the property, and hope they'd let him live. Or he could do what Sister Mary Catherine hadn't been able to do, expose the truth and bring justice for the children who'd been exploited. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. "We know who you are, Mr. Webb. Return the documents and walk away. You have until midnight to decide whether you want to live." Marcus looked at the metal box in his hands, then at the ledger filled with Sister Mary Catherine's careful documentation of terrible crimes. He thought about the children whose identities had been stolen, whose lives had been used as cover for theft and fraud. He thought about Sister Mary Catherine, who'd probably died trying to expose this conspiracy, and he thought about the fact that everyone at that auction had expected him to back down, to be another person who knew the truth, but was too afraid to act. Marcus opened the leather ledger to a random page and saw an entry from 2009. Timothy Johnson, age 8, left St. Catherine's on June 3rd to live with his aunt in Ohio. His Social Security number was used to generate $47,000 in fraudulent tax deductions for the next 4 years, distributed among 3 benefactors. Timothy died in a car accident in 2011. They continued using his identity for 2 more years after his death. Marcus closed the ledger carefully. He knew what he had to do. Elena sat on the locked bathroom floor of the Riverside Coffee House, her back against the wall, staring at the contents of Sister Agnes's strongbox. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, replaced by a cold, focused clarity as she began to understand the magnitude of what she held. The box contained 3 items: a thick leather journal, a USB drive sealed in a waterproof bag, and a stack of sealed envelopes addressed to various officials: the FBI Director, the Wisconsin Attorney General, the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services, and several investigative journalists at major newspapers. Elena opened the leather journal carefully. The first page contained a handwritten note in precise, elegant script. "My name is Sister Agnes Lindstrom. I have served as director of Sacred Heart Home for Children since 1987. If you are reading this, it means I am dead or missing, and that those who orchestrated the greatest theft from vulnerable children in Wisconsin's history have succeeded in silencing me." What follows is 23 years of documented evidence proving that Sacred Heart was used as a front for systematic fraud, totaling at least $66 million. I could not expose this truth while alive because they threatened to harm the children still in the system. But in death, I pray someone will have the courage I lacked. May God forgive us all. The date at the bottom read, October 14, 2011. Elena's throat tightened as she flipped through the pages. Sister Agnes had documented everything with meticulous care: dates, amounts, names, account numbers, copies of falsified documents. The journal read like a prosecutor's dream case file, except the crimes it detailed were almost incomprehensible in their cruelty. The scheme had multiple layers, all designed to exploit the orphanage's vulnerable population: identity theft, children who left Sacred Heart, either through adoption, aging out, or relocation, had their social security numbers used for years afterward to generate fraudulent tax deductions. Wealthy donors would claim they'd adopted children they'd never met, collecting tax benefits worth tens of thousands of dollars per child. Sister Agnes had documented 247 cases over 23 years. Fake adoptions. The orphanage created entirely fictitious adoption records for children who didn't exist, allowing wealthy individuals to claim dependents on their tax returns and collect benefits for years. These phantom children were moved between different donors' tax returns to avoid detection. Sister Agnes had identified at least 89 completely fabricated identities. Grant fraud. Sacred Heart applied for and received millions in federal and state grants for programs that never existed. Money designated for educational programs, health care, facility improvements, and child services was diverted into private accounts. The journal documented $31 million in fraudulent grant applications between 1988 and 2011. Donation laundering. Wealthy individuals and corporations donated money to Sacred Heart, received tax deductions for charitable giving, and then had most of their donations quietly returned to them through shell companies and offshore accounts. The orphanage served as a money laundering operation disguised as charity. But what made Elena's blood run cold were the names. Sister Agnes had documented everyone involved: Wisconsin State Senator Raymond Caldwell, who'd helped secure fraudulent state grants; Millbrook County Judge Patricia Hartwick, who'd approved fake adoption paperwork; Diocese Financial Controller Monsignor Vincent Drexler, who'd orchestrated the money laundering; and dozens of wealthy donors, business owners, lawyers, doctors, even a former congressman who'd knowingly participated in stealing from vulnerable children. The conspiracy reached into the highest levels of Wisconsin's religious, political, and business establishment. No wonder everyone at the auction had been terrified. This evidence could destroy careers, send people to prison for decades, and unravel a network of corruption that had operated with impunity for over 2 decades. Elena carefully photographed every page of the journal with her phone, then examined the USB drive. The label read, "Video Testimony, Sister Agnes Lindstrom, October 2011, for FBI only." A soft knock on the bathroom door made Elena jump. "Miss, are you okay in there?" A concerned female voice, probably an employee. "Yes, sorry, just a moment," Elena called back, her voice steadier than she felt. She quickly gathered the journal, USB drive and envelopes back into the strongbox, then splashed cold water on her face and tried to compose herself. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, disheveled hair, torn jacket, dirt smudges on her face from crawling through the fence. She looked like someone who'd barely escaped with her life, which, she realized, was exactly what had happened. Elena tucked the strongbox under her arm, unlocked the bathroom door, and found herself face to face with the coffee shop employee, a young woman with concerned eyes and purple-streaked hair. "Are you sure you're all right?" the employee asked. "You look like you've been through something." Before Elena could answer, she saw through the coffee shop's front window what made her heart stop. The black SUV from Sacred Heart was parked across the street. Two men in suits stood beside it, scanning the shops methodically. They were searching for her. "Actually," Elena said quickly, keeping her voice low, "I need a huge favor. Is there a back exit?" The employee's eyes widened as she followed Elena's gaze to the men outside. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Yes, and if you help me, I can make sure some very bad people face justice. But right now, I need to get out of here without being seen." The young woman hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Come on, follow me." She led Elena through the coffee shop's kitchen, past a surprised cook, and out a back door that opened into an alley behind the commercial district. "My car's parked 2 blocks that way," she pointed, silver Honda Civic. "You can hide in the back seat if you need to." "Thank you," Elena said sincerely. "You might have just saved my life. Go. I'll tell them you left through the front 10 minutes ago." Elena ran down the alley, clutching the strongbox, her mind racing. She couldn't go home. They knew where she lived. She couldn't go to the local police. The journal implicated a county judge, and she had no way of knowing who else in law enforcement might be compromised. She needed to get this evidence to someone trustworthy, someone with the authority to act on it immediately. The FBI. Sister Agnes had intended the evidence for the FBI, and Elena needed to get it to them before the people hunting her could silence her permanently. Elena found an internet cafe 3 miles from downtown Millbrook Heights and used a public computer to locate the nearest FBI field office, Milwaukee, about 90 miles southeast. She also researched the names from Sister Agnes's journal, and what she found made the situation even more terrifying. Senator Raymond Caldwell was now the Senate Majority Whip, one of the most powerful politicians in Wisconsin. Judge Patricia Hartwick had been appointed to the Wisconsin Court of Appeals. Monsignor Drexler had been promoted to Vicar General, the second highest position in the diocese. These weren't just influential people anymore. They'd spent the past 12 years consolidating power, climbing higher in their respective institutions. They had the resources, connections, and motivation to make Elena disappear, just like Sister Agnes. And they'd already proven they were willing to kill. Elena's phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "You're making a mistake, Miss Vasquez. We're watching the FBI office in Milwaukee. We're watching your home in Riverside. We're watching your mother's house in Kenosha. You cannot run from us. Return the box and no one gets hurt." Elena's blood turned to ice. They'd threatened her mother. Her phone rang immediately. Her mother's number. Elena answered with shaking hands. "Mom, are you okay?" "Elena, sweetheart, there are some men here asking about you." Her mother's voice sounded frightened but controlled. "They say you have something that belongs to them. They're being very insistent. Don't tell them anything. I'm calling the police right now. They say they are the police, honey." Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper. "But they're not acting like police. They won't show me proper identification. They're scaring me." Elena felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. These people had spent decades stealing from children, murdering anyone who threatened to expose them, and now they were threatening her elderly mother. "Mom, listen to me carefully. Go to the Kenosha Police Department right now. Drive there directly. Don't let these men follow you. I'm going to call ahead and have officers meet you there. Elena, what have you gotten yourself into? I found evidence of something terrible, Mum, but I'm going to make it right. I promise. Just get to the police station. After hanging up, Elena called the Kenosha Police non-emergency line and explained that her elderly mother was being threatened by men impersonating officers. She gave them her mother's address and description, and they promised to send a patrol car immediately. But the call had cost her precious time. Through the internet cafe window, Elena saw a familiar white panel van pull into the parking lot. They'd tracked her here, probably through her phone's GPS. Elena grabbed the strongbox and ran out the back exit, leaving her phone on the table. If they were tracking her electronically, she needed to abandon anything with a signal. She cut through backyards and side streets, making her way toward the highway. She needed a car, but her own vehicle was still parked at Sacred Heart, and rental agencies would require identification that could be traced. That's when she saw it. A taxi dropping off a passenger at a medical clinic. Elena ran toward it, waving her arms. Are you available? I need to get to Milwaukee immediately. It's an emergency. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, looked at her disheveled appearance with concern. That's a 90-mile trip, miss. Going to cost you at least $200. Elena pulled out her wallet and handed him $300 bills, emergency cash she always carried. Take me to the FBI field office in Milwaukee, please. It's literally life or death. Something in her voice must have convinced him. Get in. As they pulled onto the highway, Elena finally allowed herself to examine the USB drive more carefully. There was a small crack in the waterproof case, and when she opened it, she found a note wrapped around the drive in Sister Agnes's handwriting. To the FBI agent who receives this, my name is Sister Agnes Lindstrom. The video on this drive contains my testimony detailing 23 years of systematic fraud at Sacred Heart Home for Children. I have tried to go to local authorities, but the conspiracy includes law enforcement officials. I fear for my life. If you are watching this video, I am likely already dead. Please do not let them win. The children deserve justice. Elena's hands trembled as she read the note. Sister Agnes had known she was going to die. She'd prepared this evidence, knowing it would be her last act, her final testimony against the people who'd corrupted an institution meant to protect children. You all right back there? The taxi driver asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. I will be, Elena said quietly, once I deliver this evidence. The drive to Milwaukee took 90 minutes, and Elena spent every moment expecting to see the black SUV or white van appear behind them. But the highway remained clear, the afternoon sun casting long shadows as they approached the city. The FBI field office was located in a nondescript building on West Wisconsin Avenue. Elena paid the driver, thanked him profusely, and approached the security entrance with the strongbox held tightly against her chest. The security guard at the front desk looked up with practiced disinterest. Can I help you? I need to speak with an agent immediately. I have evidence of a major fraud conspiracy involving government officials, multiple murders. It's urgent. The guard's expression didn't change. Do you have an appointment? No, but you'll need to call and schedule one. The main number is, people are trying to kill me. Elena interrupted, her voice rising. I have evidence of a $66 million fraud scheme that reaches into the Wisconsin state government. Sister Agnes Lindstrom was murdered in 2011 for trying to expose this, and I'll be next if you don't help me right now. The desperation in her voice finally got through. The guard picked up his phone and spoke quietly into it. 2 minutes later, an agent appeared, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. I'm Special Agent Rachel Morrison, she said. Why don't you come with me, Miss Vasquez? Elena Vasquez. Elena followed the agent through security and into a small interview room. Thank you for seeing me. I know this sounds insane, but I know who Sister Agnes Lindstrom was, Agent Morrison interrupted, sitting across from Elena. Her disappearance in 2011 was investigated by this office. We suspected foul play but could never prove it. We always believed she was murdered to prevent her from testifying about financial irregularities at Sacred Heart. Elena felt a wave of relief so intense, she almost cried. Then you know about the fraud. We suspected it. But without Sister Agnes's testimony or documentary evidence, we couldn't build a case strong enough to prosecute. Agent Morrison leaned forward, her eyes intense. Do you have such evidence, Miss Vasquez? Elena placed the strongbox on the table between them and opened it, revealing the journal, the USB drive, and the sealed envelopes. Sister Agnes left this hidden in the walls of Sacred Heart. I bought the property at auction this morning, and within hours people started trying to kill me to get it back. Agent Morrison's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the journal and began reading. Her expression grew darker with each page, her jaw tightening. After several minutes, she looked up at Elena with something like awe in her eyes. Do you understand what you've brought me? This is enough to indict dozens of people, state officials, church leaders, business executives. This is the largest fraud case Wisconsin has seen in decades. Can you protect me? Elena asked. They've threatened my mother. They've been following me all day. They have resources and connections everywhere. We'll put you in protective custody immediately. Your mother too, and we'll begin arrests within hours. Agent Morrison stood and opened the door, calling out to other agents in the hallway. I need a protective detail for a witness, and I need Assistant Director Chen here immediately. We have a major case breaking. Within minutes, Elena found herself surrounded by FBI agents, all of them moving with urgent purpose. Agent Morrison had already begun making calls, coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office, organizing arrest teams. Elena felt the tension that had been coiling inside her all day finally begin to release. She'd done it. Sister Agnes's evidence was in the right hands. Justice was coming. Then Agent Morrison's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, and her expression changed to one of shock and anger. When? She demanded into the phone. How long ago? She listened for another moment, then hung up and turned to Elena with grim determination. Senator Caldwell just boarded a private plane at Millbrook Heights Regional Airport. Destination, Grand Cayman. He's running. Can you stop him? Sister Agnes Lindstrom, 1943 to 2011. She lived to protect children and died trying to give them justice. Her courage finally brought truth to light and helped hundreds of victims. May we all have her strength to stand against corruption, no matter the personal cost. Elena thought about that morning in April, when she'd raised her hand at an auction and paid 5 cents for what everyone else was too frightened to touch. She'd thought she was buying an investment property. Instead, she'd bought the key to exposing one of Wisconsin's largest fraud conspiracies, bringing justice for hundreds of victims, and honoring the memory of a brave woman who died fighting for what was right. The 5 cents had been the best investment Elena had ever made, not because of any financial return, but because it had revealed who she truly was when tested, when the stakes were high and the forces aligned against her were powerful. She discovered she was someone who would run toward danger to protect the innocent, someone who would risk everything for justice, someone who would finish what a courageous nun had started 12 years earlier. The Sacred Heart Justice Center would open in 6 months, on October 14th, the anniversary of Sister Agnes's final journal entry, the day she'd hidden the evidence and prepared to face her killers. It would be a place of healing, justice, and hope, a place where vulnerable people could find protection and support, a place where Sister Agnes's legacy would live on, helping victims long into the future. Elena touched the photograph of Sister Agnes one more time, then turned and walked toward the future, toward the work of turning a site of terrible crimes into a beacon of justice and redemption. The nightmare that had started with a 5-cent pittance, the nightmare that had started with a 5-cent bid had transformed into something beautiful. And Elena knew that somewhere Sister Agnes was finally at peace.